All right, thank you so much for staying with us. Nigeria and the United States have a long history of diplomatic, economic, and security cooperation since Nigeria's independence in 1960. The two countries share common values of democracy, human rights, and regional stability, as well as mutual interest in trade, investments, and development. Against the background of this relationship, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is visiting Nigeria as part of his tour of 4 African countries, meeting with President Bola Tinubu to discuss the strategic partnership between the two nations and how to enhance collaboration on various issues. Mr. Blinken promises $45 million to Nigeria and other countries. A lot is expected from this meeting. And I'm being joined by Dr. Andrew Nevin, who's an economist. He joins me from Dallas in the state of Texas. Thank you so much. It's good to see you. Happy New Year to you, Andrew.
Happy New Year, Toto. It's always great to be with you, brother.
Yes. First, I would like to start with your general overview of this meeting. Mr. Blinken is going to 4 African countries. Nigeria is part of it. What do you really think is happening? America is stretching this handshake all around the continent. Why is this happening?
I mean, I think it's great news for Nigeria, great news for Africa. I mean, Nigeria is a democracy and not a complex democracy, but all democracies are a work in process. And the U.S. has been a great ally of Nigeria. And of course, I think any help with the security situation, which is of concern to the U.S. and to Europe in particular in the Sahel region, is very welcome. So I think it's a great sign of confidence in Nigeria. And of course, the United States, people forget sometimes the United States is the largest single foreign investor in Nigeria. President Tinubu, His Excellency, has promised that we'll see more investment in Nigeria. So I think it's very good news that Secretary Blinken has come to Nigeria and made this effort, despite all the challenges the country faces.
You would also agree with me that President Bola Tinubu has been in the forefront of pushing for investment, looking at all the strips across the world. So what do you think about this Nigeria being opened for business?
Well, I mean, obviously it's the right direction and we want more investment in Nigeria, but I think that the administration has faltered on a few things. I mean, we had early last summer, we had the original announcements around the unification of the FX rate and the removal of the subsidy. But since that time, we haven't really seen any bold policy moves on that. It seems more like business as usual. So I think that the investors are going to be watching, and they're going to be pleased with those 2 moves, but they're going to be watching to see whether really we have a business climate that's improved. And I mean, one thing to highlight, for example, is the administration promised it would finally implement the Orange Shea report. It's more than a decade old. It has to be updated. As far as I can see, we haven't really seen any movement on that. And so while we have the structural issues of the subsidy and the FX unification, it's not nearly enough to get the reforms, to get both an investment, not just from outsiders, but investment from Nigerians, of course, because, of course, Nigerians need to invest in the country first to give confidence to others.
Interesting. So, but U.S. companies have shown readiness to invest in Nigeria, and some notable sectors, of course, agriculture, technology, and all of this is taking the forefront. How do you see this playing out? Now, Nigerians want to see this get into Naira and Kobo, putting foods on their table. That's what they want to know. How do we start to actualize all of these agreements, all of these discussions? How do we start to implement them? What's the next round of conversation?
Well, I mean, I think the great thing about the United States as a country, I mean, it really is an engine of innovation, investment, and people are prepared to take risks. So American companies will take risks much more so, for example, than British companies. And I think the commercial ties with the United States are a lot more important than the traditional ties with the United Kingdom. That said, I mean, we need the economy to start to strengthen and give some signs. And the number one issue, there's two issues that I've consistently said are holding back the economy. One is the security situation, the impact it has on the economy overall, and particularly the agricultural sector, which is critical for the nation, particularly in exports, but also people need to eat in Nigeria. Food prices need to come down, inflation needs to come down. It's not going to happen with the security situation. So I think in that dimension, it's very welcome that the United States can help Nigeria get a new security architecture that's really going to make some progress. The second big issue is, I mean, we're looking at the FX rate. is the NNPC. Now, when His Excellency the President came in, he immediately replaced the CBN governor. There's been an examination of what was going on at the CBN. The CBN and NNPC are the two biggest economic actors in the country, in the continent, in fact. NNPC, we haven't seen the same level of scrutiny on it, and there was essentially no return from NNPC to the country for several years before His Excellency took over. I was expecting, and I think other commentators, that we have a similar level of scrutiny of what's going on at the NNPC. And of course, that's what's creating the huge pressure on the foreign exchange. I said consistently before I retired that if we were producing 1.3 million barrels a day, we were going to have a very difficult FX situation, which we've had. As far as I can tell from the press reports, we continue to only produce 1.3 million barrels a day of oil. It hasn't materially increased since then. And we don't have any transparency on the flows within the NNPC. I mean, NNPC is an asset of the Nigerian people. It's the most valuable asset that they have. I mean, when I was at PwC, we wrote the paper on revitalizing dead assets. It's the largest dead asset that we have, and it's not producing a return. So I think until we really address the NNPC issue, the other types of reforms the government is embarking on aren't nearly sufficient to kind of move the economic needle.
Very interesting stuff. Now, tech giants are so interested in this country, and they've teamed up to partner with Nigeria. President Bola Tinubu plans to provide 1 million digital jobs, from that, of course, from the same sector. How feasible is this? How can we really create these jobs in the digital space?
Absolutely. I mean, again, at PwC, we wrote the paper. We wrote the paper that said Nigeria's biggest export is brains, not oil. And we said this strategy was to have people work within Nigeria, but serving global value chains. And this strategy has been picked up by the government. It's being executed. It's a great strategy. It's a capital light. It doesn't require people putting a lot of heavy capital investment into the country, so they're willing to do it. People like Microsoft and Google and Apple realize the talent in Nigeria. I mean, they have challenges of retaining talent. They're going to go to where the best talent is. So this is absolutely feasible. And I think we put on the table in our paper a couple of years ago, I think 2 million jobs in Nigeria working within global value chains. But we put it out in 2032, I think. And now the government's come along and said the next 2 or 3 years is going to create 1 million jobs. So we're absolutely at PwC before I left. And, me personally, in my personal capacity, absolutely thrilled with this is the right direction. The problem with it is just it takes a little bit of time to get those FX flows coming in from that. And so in the interim, we still need the oil FX to support the Naira and not create all the problems that we have. But this is absolutely the right direction for the government. It's a much easier strategy to implement than some other things that are suggested, for example, like solid minerals. As I said, it doesn't create, it's happening already. People do it themselves. They self-organize to do it. And a little bit of attention from the new Minister of Information Communications is going to go a long way to accelerating that. So absolutely the right strategy for the nation.
Very interesting stuff there. But I want to also ask you how we can actualize a win-win situation. In most cases, we see many of those countries taking resources from Nigeria, for example, crude oil, and they give us refined products at the end of the day. So how do we make this relationship a symbiotic one where both parties benefits evenly, but it's a win-win situation for Nigeria and the United States? What sort of partnership should we be looking at that will take us to that point?
Well, I think specifically in the area of crude oil, yeah, we should be refining it. But we've had these 3 refineries from the federal government, more of them refineries, billions of dollars being poured into it. We're not clear of the results. We see yet more announcements that they're going to come on stream. They haven't come on stream. Again, I think this is an example of a dead asset that the government continues to pour money into. The Dangote refinery is finally on stream. I've heard it's taken its first production runs on that. We'll see how long it takes to get up if it gets to its nameplate capacity. So, we understand what we need to do, but with the federal government refineries, our position when I was with PwC and my personal position is they should simply be privatized because there's just no way the federal government has demonstrated that it can run a refinery, it can turn around a refinery on that. But, as we argued in our paper a few years ago, we should focus more on the brains. I mean, the brains are higher value added than a lot of this processing we should process crude oil. But a really higher value-added strategy for the country is people who are in the software supply chains for Apple and for Microsoft. So if we get the 2 million jobs in these global value chains, everything else will take care of itself, quite frankly, on that, including the housing, including agriculture, including entertainment. All of those will benefit from the inflows that come if we have 2 million people working in Nigeria, but working at global value chain rates.
Driving the blue economy development, environmental protection, science and technology exchange are part of the focus of this meeting and discussions around this meeting. I would ask you, what do you make of this and what are the positives, particularly in the blue economy? It's a two-in-one question. And the other will be, Mr. Blinken is also commending President Tinubu for bold steps with regards to the forex market and, of course, removal of subsidy. What do you make of all of this put together?
Well, I think, every nation on the planet faces environmental challenges. And of course, Nigeria should have a blue economy. It has a large ocean. I think the thing with the United States that's really critical here is only Nigerians can solve these problems at a local level. And of course, the group of us wrote the book, Self-Organizing Nigeria. There's so much going on. The role the United States has in this, I think, is really as a place for education. There's huge ties between the United States and Nigeria in terms of numbers of students that come here. They work for a period in the United States. They gain valuable skills. When they come back to Nigeria, those people returning from the diaspora can make a huge contribution on that. And I think if we can get deeper ties with the United States, we'll have that human capital that we need to solve Nigeria's problems. But what we can't do is have U.S. programs in the country trying to solve these sorts of environmental challenges, whether it's on land or on sea. But of course, to make this work, again, we still need the Naira to stabilize because it becomes prohibitively expensive when the Naira is at 1,100 to the dollar or 1,400 to the dollar for people to be able to afford the U.S. education on that. And also we need the economy to strengthen as well, because then people who get U.S. education and U.S. experience will want to return to Nigeria. We all know so many Nigerians in the diaspora who are ready to return if there's a turnaround in the economy and improvement in their opportunities on that. So we need these things to work together. But again, I come back to why the NNPC is so critical here. So much of the challenges we're facing in the economy are related to this FX crisis. But the FX crisis is totally manufactured by Nigeria because of this drop in oil production and because of the inability, either the refusal or the inability of the administration to come to grips to what's going on at NNPC. It's the most valuable asset, again, of the Nigerian people. If it doesn't perform, it's going to be very difficult to counterbalance that with other things the country needs to do.
Well, interestingly, the federal government is also focused on investing so much in the MSME in a report that came out earlier in the week. Many will say we have 40 million, 30-something million, depending on the figures you want to believe, the number of MSMEs in the country. But investing in MSMEs really, for a country, Nigeria, 200 million persons, what more prospects do you see and what do you expect government to do to make it easier for them to be able to do business?
Well, the one issue is easier to do business. The second issue is investment. I think it's, to be honest, on the surface from what I've read, a terrible idea. What this administration needs to show is it can execute a program that delivers value to Nigerians. Because when we actually look at all of the programs announced in the last 10 years, take the power sector. There's been billions of dollars poured into the power sector, and we've got essentially no results. And in the World Bank as being, at the forefront of helping to put this money into the economy, and nothing comes back from it. And we hear these rumors of various programs like the metering program and the level of corruption or incompetence in that. But when we go anchor borrower, the cultural program for the CBN, all of these intervention programs, as far as I can see, have failed. So why would we launch another intervention program for the MSMEs? We all understand they're the backbone of the economy, but these programs don't work. What the government needs to show is, first, the programs that don't work, it needs to close them down and say to the country, we are not going to waste resources on things that don't work or are sources of corruption. And the CBN's taken a major step on that and said it's no longer doing these intervention programs that have not worked. The second step is, if the government wants to do an intervention program, it needs to actually show it can work. Why would we multiply these programs out when they're consistently showing failure? So any announcement that says the government is going to start to invest in MSMEs or form another fund, I'm extremely skeptical of. I just think the evidence over the last, certainly my 15 years in the country, is this has not been helpful for the country. And again, the power sector is one in particular. There's been a new announcement this morning, if I understand correctly, about privatization of some generating assets from the federal government that may or may not be a good idea. But really, we haven't really seen. There was an announcement early on in the administration about states taking more responsibility for power. We always said that at PwC when I was there. I personally believe that. I haven't seen any concrete action on that. So we continue to perpetuate these structures and these intervention programs that are just damaging for the country and create, again, a perception that the federal government is not able to implement. And this government needs to show when it takes resources from Nigerians, it can deliver value. And so far, it hasn't done that.
Well, finally, your outlook, despite all of these challenges, global outlook has been revised by World Bank and, of course, the IMF. What are you thinking?
I mean, in a long sweep of history, I'm very confident in Nigeria because we wrote so many papers, and of course, I personally wrote the book on self-organizing Nigeria. There's so much energy and positive things coming out. I mean, we always talk about the negatives, but when we look a little deeper, we see the positives. But at a global level, I mean, one thing people need to understand is, I mean, the number of children in the world is declining, which means, the economic growth is going to come down. The absolute number of people in China is declining. On that, country after country face these demographic challenges. So when you look at the global overall number, it's going to be low. But that doesn't mean that Nigeria can't really prosper on that. We just need to do the fundamental things, focus on the fundamentals I've always said for the past number of years. And I'm very optimistic that we can turn this around. But whether it's next year or 3 years from now or 10 years from now, the long sweep of history, it's all the same. I just hope I live long enough to see the great Nigeria we all know we can have.
Amos, thank you so much. It's good to talk to you. Dr. Andrew Nevin, thank you so much for your time. He's an economist. We wish you all the best. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. All right, it's time to review activities at the Exchange Limited, and the market is still staying